The city of Mississauga has an opportunity that only comes along once every 100 years. We have a downtown core where about 15 years ago, the city of Mississauga took off all the height restrictions. So what that means technically is that a developer can come into the downtown core and build whatever height building that they want and not pay any extra. They don't have to pay any extra Section 37s or bonusing clauses or anything to the city. So that encouraged the downtown core to become densified, which is what you're seeing now. And also at the same time, my ragtag little group down in Lakeview was getting us back our entire eastern waterfront. So we had an opportunity not unlike Chicago had in 1875 when 4 square miles of Chicago burned down in a week. And they had to rebuild the entire city. So what they did was they premised that entire planning process on 2 things: human scale, publicly accessible waterfront, and great architecture in their downtown core. And they were so successful that by 1896, they held the World's Fair. And those have been the 2 guiding principles in their master plan, which has created economic and societal prosperity for Chicago for over 100 years. Mississauga has exactly that opportunity right now. And the first motion that I presented to council when I'd been on for a week and everybody thought I was a little crazy, I said, let's identify key strategic sites within the city of Mississauga where if you're going to build a building, you have to have an international architecture competition. So we now have a registry of very key sites within the city where you are going to have architectural excellence, and the Marilyn Monroe building is a terrific example of that. As well now, I'll be showing you the master plan, but this is just one of the projects that are going on in my ward. And I actually call it, we've rebranded ourselves. It's not the #1 ward anymore, it's Ward Wonderful. So, and it truly is. So this is the site in context. So that is Port Credit. I think most people know Port Credit. This is the Lakeview site here. So you can see it's larger than Port Credit. It's larger than the city center. It's about the same size as the UTM campus and about the same size as the Metro Zoo. So it's a phenomenal amount of land. It's 254 acres, and we're actually building, we just started building right now 64 more acres out in Lake Ontario. So we're filling the lake in and creating a conservation area, a 64-acre conservation area. But this is just to give you the sense of scale. This is the site in more detail. The interesting thing about this site is that this here is the most advanced water plant in the world. We don't even use, we don't need to use chlorine anymore. We use ozone, infrared, and microfibers to clean the water. So it is the most advanced water plant in the world. And this is one of the largest wastewater plants in North America. The water plant services about 900,000 people daily, and the wastewater plant services about 700,000 people daily. When we were doing the master plan on this, we had people come over from Sweden. There's a site in Sweden called Hammarby that's one of the world's most environmentally sustainable community. And when they looked at the site, they said to me, "Oh, you're so lucky, you've got a sewage plant." And I went, "Yeah, right. Yeah, we're really lucky." But actually what we've done is we've done a study on this plant, and we're going to convert this plant to district energy. So we've redid all of the procedures on the plant in the last 6 years, and the sewage now gets eaten by microbes, and it's called an anaerobic digestion system. The sewage heats up to about 40 degrees Celsius. We've done a study on it with coal engineering that if we extract the heat from the sewage, we will be able to turn that into either air conditioning or heating, and we'll be able to heat and cool the entire new community, which is 8,000 residential units and a job area for 7,000 to 9,000 people, and an area of arts, entertainment, and culture of about 15 acres. So that's remarkable, because I don't think it's not really a coincidence that the $ is an S and with a line through it, and sustainability starts with the word S. Absolutely. So, and I've been having this debate with friends of mine for 40 years. They had come up with these great ideas for sustainability, but they don't make economic sense. So if it doesn't make economic sense, it's clearly not sustainable in my view. So that's the approach that we've taken. It's really important to understand, I think, where we were and how we got here. This is actually the Lakeview site, exactly the same site, but this was in 1940. This is exactly what it looked like in 1896. And in 1896, the federal government purchased all this land from there all the way over to here, which is Etobicoke Creek to Cooksville Creek, and the other red line is Lakeshore. So that's 1.5 miles by 2/3 of a mile, and those are all rifle ranges. So the Garrison Common in 1896, it was getting far too urban around Fort York, and they couldn't blow big things up. So they came out to Lakeview, and that was the beginning of no view in Lakeview. So they instituted firing ranges. And you can see there was beautiful sandbar beaches along here. This whole thing was a sandbar beach, lots of wetlands. It was just very much naturalized. And this is 1914. This is the Women's Home Guard practicing in 1914 during the First World War. And it was because of the work these women did that in 1917, September 1917, Prime Minister Borden gave women the vote for the very first time in Canada nationally. And and it was because of the work that these women had done. So the site has a very, particularly for the women's movement, it has a really tremendous history, but also a history of pollution. So in 1915, this is also on the site, it was the site of Canada's very first airport. The fellow on the left, the tall fellow, is J.A.D. McCurdy. He was the first Canadian to fly a plane. He flew the Silver Dart in 1909 in Nova Scotia. And he was also the first member of the British Commonwealth to fly a plane. And what I thought was really cool, he was the first human being to actually deliver mail by air. And the fellow on his right, the shorter fellow, is Glenn Curtis, who was an American. He's the father of naval air power. And he built, tested, and flew the very first amphibious plane in the world was flown on this site at Hanlan's Point in Toronto and down at a field he had in Virginia. And during the First World War, 8 of the top 15 aces from World War I were trained in Lakeview, because flying was a brand new thing. There was only one flying school in England, so a lot of the aristocracy would come over to Canada, learn how to fly, and then they went to the war. And then during the Second World War, one of the largest purpose-built munitions factory in Canada, the Small Arms Factory was built. It was 255,000 square feet. We have remaining of that, the 43,000 square foot administration building, which we've just begun to turn into a creative hub for arts. And during the Second World War, every day they had 5,500 to 6,000 people working there. 65% of them were women. So it really was the entrenchment of the feminist movement in Canada. And then in 1962, they opened this behemoth. This is Lakeshore Road here. And it was the largest coal generating station in the world at the time. It's 2,250 megawatts. And it produced 17% of the province of Ontario's power, but more importantly, in the GTA, it produced about almost 90% of the power. So it really drove our middle class economy. It was cheap power, so our manufacturing sector flourished during this time, and it was a great benefit to the province of Ontario, however, not without a cost. So this is where my little group and I came in. My wife's the teacher. She started noticing children that were going to the school, our house backs onto a schoolyard. She started noticing kids, and she said, I think I'm seeing kids with learning disabilities. So I went on to the Ministry of Education's website, and I downloaded all the information as to what the scores were for that school, and they were in the bottom 3 schools in the region of Peel for as far back as I could go. So then I started looking into what the historic stack emissions were. So this was when the plant was operating at 15% capacity with scrubbers. You can look at the massive amount of tonnage. Sulfuric acid, 260 tons of sulfuric acid. It operated from 62 to 79, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with no scrubbers whatsoever. And I can show you bricks in Lakeview on people's houses that were rotted from the sulfuric acid. And it put out mercury, cadmium, lead, zinc, pyrene, terrible, terrible things. And then I started doing research on what that does to your brain. And I was quite shocked. So I started working with a group in 1989 to promote getting rid of the coal generating station. We were successful at doing that in 2005. And then in late 2005, the city of Mississauga, who owns Enersource, and Ontario Power Generation, who are 100% owned by the province of Ontario, announced that they were going to grace us with a 1,000 megawatt gas plant to replace it. And when I saw that, I went, no, we've already done our share. And instead of saying we don't, run out into the street with stop signs saying stop the power plant, I partnered with the University of Toronto, and we used a very sophisticated computer modeling program that they have that uses Google Earth as a platform. We could drop buildings into it. They became virtual buildings. And we went out to the community and spent 3.5 years saying and asking them one question. And the question we asked was, if we could reverse 120 years of military, industrial, and utility pollution and actually create a model of sustainability for the world, what does it look like? And that's what really started us on our quest. So we did that for 3.5 years. When we first started working with the university, they could drop buildings into the program, but there was no data with it. So we worked with the University of Waterloo Computer Engineering Department. We changed it so that when we dropped a building into it, we knew exactly how many square feet the building was. We could put in a square foot price so we could figure out the cost of construction. We could put in people per unit so we could figure out what the population was, what their transportation requirements would be. And then we also figured out what the mill rate would be on a property tax base. And a short story, at the end of 3.5 years, we became the first citizen group in North America to do a complete cost analysis on a project and have it accepted by all levels of government. It was called the Lakeview Legacy Project. And the city, I found out the city was going to make about $8 to $15 million from the power plant. What we were offering them at $200 a square foot, which really you can't build for, was over $2 billion in build form and a total property tax base of almost $47 million a year. So they thought, well, that's a much better idea, completely and sustainable. And then I chaired a task force for the mayor for 2 years on waterfront development, environmental sustainability, did some work with Metrolinx on the electrification of the GO line and sustainability, and then a bunch of people said, well, we need to get you elected if we're going to get this job finished, and fortunately the citizens in Ward 1 decided to elect me. Then we started the master plan. We started an agreement the day I actually was sworn in. The day after I was sworn in, Minister Sousa and I, Charles was a rookie MPP then, we announced that we were going to cut a deal with Ontario Power Generation, with the province and the city to actually create the master plan, and that we would have it finished by August of 2014. So this was December 2nd, 2010. And I met with our city solicitor about a week later and told her, we had to get this memorandum of understanding signed by June, and she just started laughing. And she's a great girl. And I said, Mary Ellen, what are you laughing at? She said, I was a city solicitor for Toronto. It took 5 years for us to do the MOU for Waterfront Toronto. And I said, okay, we're going to get this one done by June. We had it done by June. The deal was that we would have the master plan completed and accepted by all parties by August of 2014. And Waterfront Toronto took 14 years to design their master plan. And we actually had it done. It went to the board of OPG in August of 2014, and they put their stamp on it, which was great. So this is the master plan. So it's about 8,000 units, 15 to 20,000 people. Then there's a job corridor for innovation for 7,000 to 9,000 jobs. There's about 10 acres of arts, entertainment, and culture, all based around here. And the one thing you will notice is there is now a new landform. This is the site that we've actually started building that right now. It's fully funded, and we've started building it. So this is our land use. What we plan on doing here is turning where the old power plant was, which is right here. We're going to turn that into an island and create channels around it, so that shallow channels, so that in the summer we can do canoeing, kayaking, paddleboarding, and then hopefully in the winter, if we still have winter in 10 or 15 years, then we will be able to use it as a massive skating oval, which will really be a lot of fun. So this is how the neighborhoods work out. We broke it down into 6 neighborhoods and 5 precincts. 85% of it is 3 to 8 stories, and only 15% of it is 8 to 15 stories, and the 8 to 15 stories is all based around an LRT loop that runs through the middle of the site, which means that everything will be within a 5-minute walk of the LRT loop. So this is Rangeview Estates. We're really fortunate in Mississauga, I guess. If you look at Google Earth and you see the street grid in Toronto is very north-south, and then as soon as you get into Mississauga, it tilts. So everything we have is either faces southwest or northeast. So consequently, we have beautiful sunlight all day long. And I see a lady nodding her head. You're absolutely right. So we get this amazing sunlight in Mississauga. So what we've done is we preserved all of the view corridors so that you will have great views of the waterfront. We preserved green spines so that they can connect people by cycling and walking. And we've designed all of the units so that they're in quads, and there'll be creeks running through all of these quads that actually will be replacing the storm sewers. So we have storm sewers pipes in the ground. In more enlightened countries like Denmark and Sweden, they actually use stormwater creeks. So they become an amenity for the people living in the complexes. And they are much, as far as maintenance goes, they're a lot less expensive. You put plants in them that do phytoremediation, so the water actually gets cleaned as it's going back into the lake. Currently, we just use big hard pipes, so everything that hits the road, all the salt, all the hydrocarbons, phosphorus, it all just goes straight into Lake Ontario, and we drink Lake Ontario. So as far as sustainability goes, it's very important that we change those practices. This is the Ogden Village, so this is where the LRT loop comes in, right there, and goes around. And this will be the main commercial spine, the yellow line. That'll be the new commercial spine. So there'll be taller buildings on that. Here's where it starts to get fun. So this is the cultural area. So there'll be boardwalk cafes, restaurants, clubs. There'll be galleries, museums, and then there'll be a precinct in here for digital economy. So these will all be residential incubator spaces for the new digital economy, graphic arts, and that type of thing. And this is the key. This is actually what I've been focused on for about the last 6 or 8 months, and what I will be focused on for until the 2018 budgets for submissions, actually, for the federal and provincial government. So we've just started a business case study. We'll be hiring a consultant in a couple of weeks, and this is called the Searson Campus. That's a placeholder name for it, but the Searson's Campus is going to be a center for Great Lakes urban and environmental sustainability. So it's really all about the products, services, and technologies for the new emerging green economy. And we're not too sure about that now that Mr. Trump has been elected, but we do know that eventually, we know two things. We know eventually we're going to have to become more sustainable because everything's just too expensive. Like if you were to switch to LED lights in your entire house right now, you'd save 30% in your electrical bill. That's remarkable. And the way they keep increasing the cost of electricity, people will go to the new technologies. They will have to. And the beauty of this site is that it has all of the elements that we need. And then this is the innovation corridor. It'll house 7,000 to 9,000 jobs. It's going to sort of look like that up in the right-hand corner. You can see some of these slides are images of what may happen or the type of architecture that's being considered. And so the idea is the products and services and technologies that get developed in the research center spin off into real jobs and real services and very good jobs in the innovation corridor. So you can just go to the next slide, please. So this is the site. I actually call it a lab. Yes, the laboratory. The other thing that we do know is that the federal government has already guaranteed $800 million towards the emerging green economy. We know that, on the way in, I was listening to the environment minister talking about the cap and trade that's coming in next year. That's going to provide, $1.9 billion a year that's also going to be going into the green economy. I don't know what anybody thinks about cap and trade. It sounds a little smoke and mirrors to me, but at the end of the day, we are going to have $1.9 billion that's going to be reinvested into businesses that create services and products for the green economy. So the reason that this site is the 100% location is we have the world's most advanced water plant, one of the world's most advanced wastewater plants. For the last 4 years, we have had doctoral students from the University of Toronto, Waterloo, and Guelph doing research for us, advanced research on water and wastewater technologies. Because if you're going to have a sustainable world and a sustainable society, you have to have sustainable water and wastewater. So that's one area that we've already delved into. The other thing is we've got 254 acres of brownfield. I had a meeting with one of Ontario's foremost brownfield experts yesterday, and we need to figure out how we can clean up brownfields better, how we can do it faster, how we can do it cheaper, how we can do it more effectively. So that this site on a 20-year build gives us the opportunity to be able to do that. The other thing that we have is we're going to have some of the smartest, most advanced houses in the world. When I was in Sweden last summer, I saw 4 tennis courts built in one building, and the only heat that was required were the light bulbs and the people in the building. And it gets to be minus 22 there. So yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it? It really is remarkable. So when you think about that, and you think about sustainability and the cost of all of that, if you can make that sustainable and you can create a product, people are going to want to, they will need it in the future. The other thing that we have is we have, and we've just started this piece here, is a 64-acre conservation area that we're building. Currently, Searsons Creek is underneath the wastewater plant in a pipe. Applewood Creek is on this side, and it's basically a ditch. So we're out about 100 meters in the lake right now with the fill. It's 1.5 million cubic meters of fill, and we're going to create wetlands at the bottom of Searsons Creek, at the bottom of Applewood Creek, connect them with a treed swamp, then we're building a forest in front of it, and then the rest of it's just going to be migrating bird, wildlife habitat, and fish habitat. We're even building spawning beds here underneath the water and shoals for fish. And this is where I always have issues with my colleagues in Toronto. Toronto, did you hear about the rail deck park that Toronto wants to build? Anybody hear about that? Yeah, $1.1 billion, and they're getting 24 acres of parkland. And the thing that really upsets me about that, and some of you may have heard me tee off on John Tory about his wall, but that's 21 acres, $1.1 billion. They will go to the federal and provincial government and they'll say, you give us a third, you give us a third, we'll put in the other third. But those other 2/3, that's your tax dollars and my tax dollars, federally and provincially. And I don't think that's right. It's not right. It's absolutely not right. Since I've been tracing the money, and I had staff give me a report on it actually, a report came to council last week. Since the inception of Waterfront Toronto has got $1.6 billion for their waterfront from the federal and provincial government, and in exactly the same amount of time, the city of Mississauga has received $4.03 million. So that is, they've received 387 times more than we have for their waterfront. And that's our tax dollars. So this site is a 64-acre conservation area. It's fully funded by the Region of Peel. It's $60 million. But how we're financing it, to talk about how sustainability works, and the dollar sign that is sustainability, is that the Region of Peel didn't have any place to put their fill from all these large capital projects. The contractors were driving it up to Barrie. So I said, why don't we get both conservation authorities together and see what we can do with that fill locally to create something that's beneficial to not only the environment, but to the community. And so now this is going to connect 9.5 kilometers of shoreline for a water's edge experience for the public, and it's going to create 64 new acres of habitat right smack in the middle of 6.2 million people. It's $60 million, but we get 25 million of that capital back from the tipping fees. So they give us the cubic meter of dirt, and they give us $10, and that's going to surprise. So when you look at how Toronto approaches things and how Mississauga approaches things, we spend your tax dollars far better than probably any municipality in the country. So I think that's it.